here in Uganda from Kampala. You're welcome, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for this policy dialogue on climate change. So as we begin, let us have a second minute of prayer. Let's humble ourselves and we pray. Lord Father, I want to thank you this afternoon as we convene to have a conversation about the climate change in the world, in Uganda. Lord, we thank you. May you bless this conversation and may you let it yield fruits that will serve generations and generations. Thank you. In Jesus' mighty name I have prayed. Amen. Inshallah. We recognize all the Muslims that are around, and we also understand that you're going through your fasting period. All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, again. My name is Chankara Bennett. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Efficacy Methodology. But this afternoon, I will be your host for this dialogue. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know that climate change issue is an issue that needs immediate redress. Several conversations have already been held, and this part of the conversation will add to the voice of the many voices that already has gone with regards to climate change. Now, allow me to speak briefly about Efficacy Methodology. Efficacy Methodology is a public policy think tank working in Africa, focusing on advancing evidence-based public policy practice. Now, the only difference with other public policy think tanks is that Efficacy Methodology has a strong link to the community. As a matter of fact, this conversation is also, to us, is regarded as a community engagement in order to add the voice, to be able to extend the voice to the local communities, to be able to understand the conversation around climate change. Now, Efficacy Methodology has three major areas that we focus on, and that is climate change and environment, governance and leadership, economic growth, and development. Now, these are broad areas that we focus on as an organization, but there are also other thematic areas that we narrow on for this to advance our contribution to the continent. Now, climate change policy dialogue this afternoon, the overall objective is to help the local communities to fully understand the climate change bill and help them prepare for the implementation. Here in Uganda, the climate change bill that we're having a conversation today is actually going to be tabled in Parliament this afternoon as we speak. So the gentleman that is going to be joining us to discuss this bill will also later on go back to Parliament to make a case. Now, as you're all aware that climate change is a global war, it is a war that involves all of us. It knows no color, no tribe, no religion, no political affiliation, and no boundaries. Every one of us needs to make a case to be able to contribute significantly in fighting climate change. Now, in Uganda, you're aware that in most recent cases, we have experienced increased flooding, prolonged drought, rising water levels. For example, Lake Victoria here, the water levels were so high last year. We are, as a country, we're also experiencing high level of forest cover depletion. Actually, it is being projected by the UN that in the next, by 2025, Uganda will have lost all the forest cover. We've experienced locust invasion, air pollution. Kampala is ranked 5th in the continent as the worst polluted city. So there is a lot of conversation that we need to have around climate change. Now, this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by distinguished panelists, several environmental organizations and institutions, civil society, non-government organizations, and academia. Allow me to briefly read for you the list of the guests that are midst us this afternoon. In our midst, we have Dr. Margaret Chigozi. She is the former executive director of Uganda Investment Authority. Amidst us, we also have Dr. Frank Rusha. Frank Rusha is the Executive Secretary of the Inter-Party Organization for Dialogue, IPOD, as well as the Netherlands Institute for Multi-Party Democracy. We also have Ms. Eunice Musime, who will, I think, be joining us. She is the Executive Director of Akina Mama wa Africa. We also have Associate Professor Gerard Kagambirwe. He is the Dean of Public Administration, School of Management Science, Uganda Management Institute. We have also received participants or distinguished guests from Makerere University. We have received guests from Makerere University Business School. We've received guests from Chambogo University. We've also received guests from Uganda Christian University. Ladies and gentlemen, we are also pleased as an organization to have amongst us some of our board members. We have Dr. Dan Ayebale. Dr. Dan Ayebale is the Vice Chairperson, Board of Directors at Efficacy Methodology. He is also the Senior Lecturer at Chambogo University. Amidst us, we also have Professor Thomas Archibald, who is associate at Virginia Tech. He's joining us from the United States of America. And amidst us, we also have Professor Emmanuel Bothale, who is a board member at Efficacy Methodology. He's joining us from University of Botswana, in Botswana. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon, we are blessed by three distinguished panelists. That is Honorable Biinka Lawrence Sonko. He is the Chairperson Climate Change Committee in Parliament of Uganda and a Member of Parliament for Ora County, Zombo District. Honorable Biinka is an entrenched environmentalist and accomplished legislator. He participated and led Uganda in the development of the current Climate Change Bill 2020. As I already said earlier, this bill this afternoon will be going back to Parliament for, I think, the final reading and will be passed. On several occasions, he has been at the forefront of protecting the natural resource of this country. This key responsibility has made him distinguish himself as an international protagonist in the climate change arena. Honorable Lawrence holds a Master of Science in Environment and Natural Resources from Makerere University, and also a Master of Business Administration from Cavendish University. You're welcome, Honorable. I'm not able to see your video, sir. Hello, sir. All right. Now we will proceed. Honorable Lawrence will be discussing the background, the future, and the hopes of the Climate Change Bill 2020. Amidst us, we are also blessed to have this afternoon Sarah Birete. Sarah Birete is a Ugandan most celebrated constitutional watchwoman. If you speak about the constitutionalism in this country, you will have to begin from Sarah Birete. For over 15 years, she has been actively demanding for constitutionalism in this country. The energetic human rights defender is an accomplished lawyer who has defended the rights of many vulnerable people across the continent. She is currently the Executive Director for Center for Constitutional Governance and a partner founder of Kamugisha Advocates. You're welcome, Madam Sarah.
Thank you, and good afternoon, our audience for that day, and co-fellow panelists.
Thank you. She will be discussing the role of the private sector and the civil society in fighting climate change. We're also blessed this afternoon to have Kai Ebren. as our panelist. He is a Swedish sustainable development expert with over 30 years experience working in climate change mitigation, sustainable business, green finance. He has extensive knowledge of the green economy, a track record of collaborating with public, private, and non-government organizations in Europe and across the world. In 2000, Ebren co-founded Sustainable Business Consultancy. He has also served as a senior advisor to the South Pole Group and as a managing director of Crowdsourcing Week Europe, where he developed innovative finance solutions, social entrepreneurship, and city-focused sustainability to a wide range of organizations. Ebren has increasingly looked to the green bond, alternative finance, and the use of digital solutions to transform cities into desirable, smart, low-emission places to live and work in. He is currently the director of the Transformers podcast. You're welcome, Mr. Kai Ebren.
Thank you very much, Bernard.
Mr. Kai Ebren will be discussing how can climate change law be a tool to fight climate change. He will offer us the perspective from the developed countries. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, allow me to declare this occasion open, and we will have our first presentation from Honorable Biinka Lawrence Sonka. Why? Because he has a presentation at the same time in Parliament, and so if he makes his presentation first, it will help him save time so that he can also go and make a case in the floor of Parliament. Honorable. Honorable, you're muted, sir. Please unmute. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the technical problem, but I'm very glad that we are having this conversation this afternoon. It is at a time when we are also celebrating the Earth Day, and it is also at a time when we are going to present the climate change bill in Parliament of Uganda. I'm very grateful to join this conversation, and I want to pass my apology in advance because after my presentation, I will go to the floor of Parliament and continue with the second and third reading of the climate change bill. But as far as the climate change bill is concerned, you may be aware that Uganda developed the climate change policy to 2015, and we didn't have a climate change law in the country. At that time, we didn't even have a climate change committee in Parliament. What we had in Parliament was, or associating with Parliament, was the Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change. And in 2017, I became the chair of the Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change. And it is the work of the Climate Change Forum that was valued by Parliament and the government of Uganda to enable us create a climate change committee in Parliament as a standing committee. And immediately we started working on the climate change bill. And this bill is in line with the policy. And this bill will help us to implement that policy because there was up to now, there is that gap in the legal framework to address climate change in the country. So the work of the committee is to see the responsiveness of the government of Uganda in addressing climate change and scrutinizing all bills relating to climate change. One problem we realized immediately was that Uganda
Honorable, we are not getting you. Sorry for that technical glitch.
Nation Framework Convention to Combat Climate Change is hosted by climate change department in the Ministry of Water and Environment. And you take the UNCCD, which is the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, is hosted in the Ministry of Agriculture. Then there are other conventions like the CBD, hosted in NEMA. So the efforts we are doing are really scattered. So this climate change committee is to bring all stakeholders from government, civil society, private sector, and academia together so that we can be able to implement, but also report on our progress in addressing climate change in the country in totality. And we cannot report leaving out the work of the civil society organization or private sector or academia. That will be the contribution of Uganda. And along that line, Uganda signed and ratified the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol, and also the Paris Agreement. So we need to domesticate this in our local context of Uganda. We have common but differentiated responsibilities. So in the local context of Uganda, depending on our capability and socioeconomic level of development, we have come up with a climate change bill, which was read for the first time. And the object of this bill is to give a force of law in Uganda to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Kyoto Agreement. But particularly, this bill is to provide for climate change response measures, to provide for participation in climate change mechanisms, to provide for measuring of emissions, reporting, and verification of information, as well as to provide for institutional arrangement for coordinating and implementing climate change response measures, and finally, to provide for financing for climate change and other related matters. The bill is having 7 parts. Of course, before I go there, I want to talk about the defect of the law. Currently, there is no legal framework governing climate change intervention. And absence of such framework is an obstacle in translating the identified policy priority into implementation, action with tangible climate change benefits. So now we are closing that gap, and we are hopeful that if this bill is passed, we shall be able to have a law that can guide us in the implementation of the climate change policy. Key in this is that the climate change response measures is in part 2, and then climate change mechanism in part 3, and part 4 is measuring of emission, reporting, and verification of information. And then part 5 is institutional arrangement. And then we have part 6 is financial provision. And then finally, we have the miscellaneous. So basically, these are the areas covered in that particular bill. So we are hopeful that when we present today, the second reading, this bill will be passed, and we shall be able to implement our climate priorities. As you all aware, in the background, Mr. Shankara gave you the background that the challenges we are facing in the country is enormous, and leaving climate change out, you know, there are factors that can power development in any country, starting with the issue of energy access, transport, industrialization, and also availability of cheap money that can be borrowed to be used to power small scale to medium enterprises. But also climate change is another very serious factor, maybe number 5. And number 6 is the issue of mortality. Mortality is high for mothers in Uganda and children under 5, basically relating to 5 factors. Issues to do with water, sanitation, hygiene, nutrition, and energy access for cooking and lighting. Many of our young, newly born are dying because of indoor air pollution relating to the lack of clean cooking. So these factors can be addressed, but some are even aggravated by by climate change. So if we can address these factors, it will be very important. But taking the priority development pathway Uganda has has put in place. If you look at our Vision 2040, NDP3, the NDC we developed, the Green Growth Strategy, the Red Plus Readiness Strategy, they are all pointing to addressing some of these challenges. But let us come to energy, which is a priority of Uganda. The energy we are promoting is basically, based on the Paris Agreement, we talked about, we are going to prioritize adaptation. And in adaptation, we say we are going renewable energy, and one of them is hydroelectric power. But now this hydroelectric power, which we are building from high interest loans, rely heavily on the health of the watershed. But the watershed, the forests around these dams are getting depleted by charcoal burners, by people who are cutting firewood, because they don't have alternative income. And therefore, in the long run, we see a possibility that these dams may not give us electricity, because if there is no forest to attract the rain, there will be no water in the river, there will be no water to power the turbine. So when we are developing our hydropower, we should also look at alternative livelihood. We should have a holistic approach to addressing climate change in the country. Coming to issue of transportation, we are supposed to be low carbon. We should be moving towards low carbon economy. But also we have to cut cost of transport. But importantly, we have to have resilient transport. Then resilient transport means we should be able to build transport system that can withstand the impact of climate change. For example, floods. If our bridges are washed away, if our roads are washed away, it can affect the economy greatly. Recently, or last year, there was the SAD, the floating island, which blocked the Jinja Dam, our hydropower source at Jinja in Uganda, for some hours, and it really brought a blackout to many parts of the country. So now we are saying, if such incidents continue, what power source are we going to use? That's why we still talk about the energy mix. We need to have energy mix so that if one source is affected, we should go to the other. So these are challenges we really need to address as a country, but we have to look at it in a very holistic manner. And when it comes to the issue of climate financing, Uganda has not received a lot of money from the Green Climate Fund as promised. We only got $24 million to address issues of wetlands. But when you look at countries like Ethiopia, they have gone far ahead of us. So now we are telling the international community as well that the procedure to access this money for adaptation, maybe from the Adaptation Fund, from the Green Climate Fund, from the Global Environment Facility and other funds, the procedure should be easier for developing countries so that we can be able to help and address climate change. Importantly, we are a source of a very important river and lake. Lake Victoria is a very important lake, but also River Nile is a very important river. And if we destroy the watershed of these two big water bodies, it will be a challenge not only to Uganda, but to the region. So we really need to work together to see that each country is responsive to addressing climate change, and the work of our committee in Uganda is what brings everyone, government, academia, civil society, and private sector. Anybody saying that we are working to address climate change in Uganda cannot go without the knowledge of our committee, because when we have to report on all organizations that are doing something to address climate change in the country. So I want to thank the team joining us in this conversation, that this is not the end, but we shall continue to interact so that we can help to address climate change, not only in Uganda, but also beyond Uganda. I want to thank you very much for giving me this time.
Thank you very much, Honorable Binga Lawrence. Thank you for those deep background that you've provided. Now that you want to leave us quite early, there are some questions that came through. We would like you to respond to some of them. Now, one of them is, this is 2021. The conversation that surrounds climate change has been here for quite some time. And it has been here for quite some time. What has what has been the major cause of the delay? Because this is 2021, the conversation of climate change has been there. From what I hear from your voice is that you've done an incredible job, which I understand. What has been the cause of delay? In a matter of fact, the very bill that you're presenting today has been pushed through the order paper, I think for, if not twice, then 3 times before it is being read.
Yes.
Do you think
Yes.
there is political will from government?
There is a very high political will, and this bill I'm presenting is not a private member's bill, it's a government bill. The delay was first, we would have presented this bill even last year, but we needed wider consultation. The Right Honorable Speaker of Parliament, who is passionate about climate change issues and also a patron to the Parliamentary Forum on Climate Change, was able to advise us or guide us that it is better we do a wider consultation. And we open up. That's why a number of civil society organizations, private sector, academia, were able to submit to this bill. Otherwise, if we made the bill only based on the presentation from the MDAs, the ministries, department, and agents, would have left some of these bodies out. So we need a longer time for this consultation so that we make a very comprehensive law that will be able to address climate change in Uganda in totality. And we wanted wider consultation because we don't want to make this law today and then tomorrow again it goes for revision before even we have implemented it for a long time.
All right, thank you very much. Again, following to that, you talked in detail about climate change financing. And in that regard, you have provided the limitations that you have experienced with regards to the funding that comes internationally. Now, I want us to draw our attention to Kenya, for example. Kenya Climate Change Initiative, the private sector funds about 41% of the climate change engagement within Kenya. What does this bill provide, or what alternatives do you have to be able to galvanize the funding from the private sector? I think this question is also linked to what Madam Sarah Burete will be presenting, but you can give us your thoughts. Yeah.
In this bill, we have provided for a climate change fund. Other than the international funds in the agreements, convention, and treaties, we want to create a climate change fund where we can have a pool or a kind of basket fund which can help to address climate change. There were initiatives like from the EU, like the solar production grant scheme, where people would apply to plant trees. But this time we want to create a fund which will be managed locally. If I want to do anything to address climate change in the country, I should be able to go for that fund. And it is provided for in this bill. And that is where private sector and anybody who is interested or who has interest in supporting issues of climate change will be able to put some resources. That is what we have provided for it.
Okay, thank you again, Honorable. One last question that is coming through before I ask a participant from the attendance to be able to ask 1 or 2 questions before we let you go. Uganda's response to climate change has remained and concentrated at policy level, and it has detached itself from the community. In several occasions, when you have conversations with the local people, they actually don't even understand what you're talking about. When you ask them about climate change, some of them can only give you the symptoms, but they don't have a deep knowledge about it. So the policies has been policies in several occasions, and this has not translated to the local people. What is there in the bill that will necessitate that the local community are fully absorbed in the participation with this climate change? For example, let's look at the National Adaptation Program of Action, which was drafted in 2007. It has never been implemented. It was only piloted in 5 districts, and up to now, it has never seen the light of the day. How different is this law?
Yeah, thank you very much. The involvement of the local government or the local community is very, very important. in addressing climate change. Whatever we are talking about will have to be implemented at the grassroots. And in this bill, there is a very good structure which we have put in place. And you may be aware in Uganda, we have the Policy Committee on Environment chaired by the Prime Minister. Yeah. But in this bill, we have created another committee, what we call the Climate Change Advisory Committee. These are technical people drawn from all backgrounds to advise the Ministry of Water and Environment that is in charge of climate change issues in the country. And the Ministry of Water and Environment will now take the position based on the advice also to the Policy Committee on Environment. But at the grassroots, we have also the committee at the local government level, and they'll be able to develop their action plan at the local government, and the action planning will come up to the center. It is bottom-up approach we are going to use to see that priority issues in the communities can reach the central government. And it should be given priority in the implementation. And we have also provided that the Ministry of Finance will be able to report to Parliament on how much money they have sent to the Ministry of Water and Environment and to the local government for addressing climate change in the country. The Minister for Finance will report annually to Parliament. And the Minister for Water and Environment will also report annually on the amount of money they have received and what percentage was sent to the local government. So we think that along that line, we shall be able to track progress or whatever is taking place from the grassroots up to the national level. So those are the areas where we have provided for some tracking of progress to address.
All right. Thank you very much.
And moreover, we shall have the climate change fund. Moreover, we shall have the climate change fund where any community that is interested in doing something to address climate change will be able to access that fund in the most easiest way than making the procedure very complicated for the private sector or community.
Thank you very much, Honorable, for that detailed elaboration. I will request one of the participants if you have questions. Davis,
yes.
Mr. Davis, do you have a question?
Bernard, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm getting you, sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am glad to be part of the panel, and I'm very grateful to be directly connecting to Professor Madam Sarah Beret and Mr. Lawrence. I salute you, gentlemen and lady, and I'm sorry I joined late. I found when Mr. Lawrence was almost winding up, but I hope I will catch up. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Please kindly make your question, sir.
My question is, Uganda is one of the countries that is well endowed with natural environment. We are blessed with a lot of wetlands, with the water, with all sorts of natural and environmental resources. So my question goes to Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
How come that all this long, the laws and policies that are in place to protect and conserve the environment have been largely interfered by the economists, if I can use the word economist, by the businessmen. Mm-hmm. Most often than not, when you move around the country, you find that most of the encroachers of wetlands are businessmen. Most of the encroachers of wetlands are people we call investors who are building factories in wetlands. So I was asking, as a lawmaking body we entrust with all the clean brains we have, can't we have a say on this investment in wetlands?
Yes, that's a very good question. For sure, there are a lot of destruction taking place, especially in the wetlands. And we have covered extensively the issue of managing wetland in the National Environment Act, which came out last year in 2019, actually. The National Environment Act has catered for that and provided for penalty. And using that law, we are now in the process of canceling some of the titles that were actually got not legally in some of those areas. I remember from NFA alone, we have about 400 illegal titles that are going to be canceled by the Ministry of Land very soon. But the most important thing is, when we are doing any development, we are supposed to do what we call environmental impact assessment. And NEMA is charged with the responsibility to ensure that the environmental impact assessment is done in the most appropriate way, and whether the same institution is supposed to advise whether the activity should continue or not. All these things are contained actually in the environmental impact statement. But what is a problem now is the issue of enforcement. Why can't we enforce? NEMA keeps saying somehow there is no money no resources to do serious enforcement. So in the law, what we are provided, again, we say, okay, then there is also the issue of, they say there are people who do not value the environment, either due to lack of awareness or having economic interest. Then we have created for environmental protection force. Before, they would pick the normal police personnel to work as environmental protection police. But this time in the law, we have provided for that. The police force that are going to work as environmental protection force must be recruited as staff of NEMA. Because we don't want a situation where we just pick a policeman and we put in the environmental protection force, and this policeman is reporting to the Inspector General of Police. Sometimes the enforcement becomes a problem. We want these people to be under NEMA, and they report to NEMA, recruited by NEMA, but can be trained by Uganda Police or UPDF, Uganda People's Defense Force. So the issue of enforcement is still a challenge. And also the institution like NEMA is saying we don't have enough resources in our budget to really implement it the way we desire. So our urge is to see that we look for these resources and give to NEMA, but also most importantly, we need to create awareness in the population. We need to create awareness, and we must target the audience, the local community, the investors, the politicians, the technical people, everybody. We must package the information, because awareness will be key to the various bodies. And the destruction that are happening for the population, like in the communities, especially in Eastern Uganda, where they are growing a lot of rice, they have no alternative where to rice, but also they have no alternative rice or reclaiming wetland. So we need programs that can be more lucrative. For example, for the charcoal burners, we need programs that can take these people away from charcoal burning, and the alternative activity should be able to give them better money than charcoal burning or selling or firewood. But what we know is the NEMA keeps telling us there are people who cannot be touched. The other day, the Right Honorable Speaker tasked the Minister for Environment to come up with the names of these people who say they are untouchable, so that we can see whether the law cannot be used on them. Yes.
Thank you very much, Honorable. I think those are very good insights. Our only concern is that we hope that it is implemented. Now we have two questions. We have two final questions that are coming through from the audience. One is coming from Greenwatch Uganda, and Ms. Duffin is saying, how has the bill addressed the gendered impacts of climate change on women? How has the bill addressed the gender impacts of climate change on women?
Yes, gender and climate change is a very serious issue that is really supposed to be followed. And even right from the various negotiations we had, I remember Honorable Winnie Masiko was actually negotiating for us gender and climate change. And by then I was the deputy chair of the Natural Resources Committee. The issue of gender and climate change is very serious, and whatever the bill, whatever is in the bill is really gender sensitive to help and address climate change. Of course, you know, this climate change is affecting everyone, correct? But women, the gender groups are affected differently. And in Zombo, for example, my district, our economy is still agro-based, but the 80% of the agricultural work is being done by women. So now when climate change sets in, the women are really affected, and that means they will not produce enough food to feed the population. They will not have food for market, and they will not have food for emergency. And once they don't have food, it can bring nutritional challenges to the children. And once a kid is sick, it is the same woman to go and take care of this kid in the hospital. That means agriculture is left to nobody. That's the connection. So we make this law catering for that kind, because we know that 80% of our farming is being done by smallholder farming families, and women are on the lead. So we really need to address that. But also we want this law to help the young people so that they can, first of all, appreciate green enterprises that they can do, which will have double advantage, like addressing the environmental challenges, but also giving them income. So the issue of gender is really catered for in this law. But you know, this agriculture these women are doing is actually practiced on less favored areas. Some are in the mountain areas, on the marginal lands, prone to landslides and so on. But others are like in the northern Uganda. These are areas that are recovering. It is also less favored because it is still recovering post-conflict from the conflict. It is a post-conflict area. But also when you go to other areas, the issue of monoculture has been so long that the farming can no longer give them enough yield. And related to that, again, we are losing a lot of resources for service, and the processing is done rudimentary, mostly again by women. So we really need to see what can be addressed once we pass this law and make the regulation, amend the policy. We should really be gender sensitive.
Thank you very much. I'm happy that the gender issue, because it's very critical. It's very critical that the gender issue is addressed within the law, within the legal framework that we have. The last question that is coming in from Dr. David Sekamate. Dr. David Sekamate is asking, how does the bill address the role of universities in climate change mitigation and adaptation? How does
we have invited? Yes, thank you. We've invited a number of academia here to interact with us with the bill. They made their submissions, and we want to see that education and research. The last part of the bill is actually talking about education and research, right from primary up to the university. We don't want the universities to do this research and just shelve. We want to share that information which they are, as whether it is relating to technology to address climate change in the country. We need to work together. There is no way Uganda is going to report progress on addressing climate change in the country and leaving the academia out. So the bill caters for education and research, actually the last education and research, and also integration into the curriculum.
Thank you very much, Honorable Biinka Lawrence, for your presentation. And we have also now exhausted the aspects of your discussion. However,
I'm actually very sorry that I have to rush to the house.
Before we allow you run away, I will ask if Madame Sarah Berete have a question for you.
Thank you very much, Bernard. I think for me, the general concern about laws and our parliament in Uganda is that in most cases, save for the climate change, and I wish to thank Honorable Vika for the efforts. But in most cases, Uganda's problem is not the absence of laws. It's lack of implementation of the laws. So what measures are you planning to make sure that once this bill is passed into law, it does not also gather dust on our desks, joining the bulk of paper tiger of laws that are not respected, that are not implemented in this country?
Yeah, I really want to put also the question to all our listeners that by now, each and every group should be knowing why is it that Uganda has good implemented. I would even put this question to the academy. What is the problem? But for us, the few institutions we have interacted with, they would talk about lack of funds. They will talk about limited awareness. They will talk about the untouchable. Those are the three key things. And then, the finance, those three areas. But academia and other people are doing research in why Uganda has good laws, but cannot be implemented, can provide us more information. That's why we really want to work together. But for us in the bill, we want to address that by having a climate change fund, by increasing awareness and education, but at the same time putting stringent penalties in case there is someone who has brought a problem to the environment and like post climate change.
Thank you, Honorable. We will allow Honorable to proceed
Yes,
to Parliament so that
I don't want them to jump because I'm not around.
Yes,
Yes.
You need to go and make your case. Thank you, Honorable, for joining us in this conversation.
Yeah.
We thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening presenting the bill.
Okay, I wish you a wonderful discussion and we shall continue sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Okay, before you go, Honorable, okay, he has gone. He has gone, but I have seen Kai Ebron wanted to raise a question, but still the question can still be raised, and so the discussions can go on. Now, with that exhaustive discussions on the climate change bill itself, we will go to the second topic of the discussion, which will be presented by Ms. Sarah Birete. And the question is what the role of the private sector and the civil society in fighting climate change. Thank you very much, Madam. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, our audience once again, especially those who introduction. Today being Earth Day, and I'm glad to from the rich background shared by our Honorable MP. I wish to start by sharing a quotation from Ledbert Johnson, saying that the environment is where we all have a mutual interest, and it's one thing that we all share. So as we discuss the climate change bill and the mitigation and adaptation factors, I think it's important for us all to acknowledge and continue sensitizing people about the fact that once we destroy, we will all be destroyed by climate change and not the planet. So the way our leaders, both in government and business, are going about, first of all, it's important to acknowledge the journey that the globe has walked for the realization that focus on mitigating the effects of climate change as urgent business. And in the same vein, I wish to acknowledge all the actors, and especially the young activists that are now, driving the environment and the climate adaptation campaign, our own Ugandans that are on the global stage. It's important to know that once businesses and governments do not focus on controlling the gas emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions to avoid disaster, then we are all doomed together as a country. Uganda has the biggest loss of forest cover at a rate that is worrying. And we all know that with global warming, climate change, and the devastating loss of biodiversity, these are the greatest threats that humanity has ever faced. So our actions or inactions have an equal damaging effect when it comes to climate change. And the area we realized that as citizens, the better for all of us. Soil is losing the snow cover. The same applies to Mount Kilimanjaro. When you are flying over, you realize the real impact of climate change. Some people are talking of climate change as if it is still far and we have time. But climate change effects are with us. Snow cover has disappeared on these two mountains. When you fly over Mount Mahavura, you realize part of it looks like a semi-desert. And these are things that our political leadership rarely talk about. Our political leadership is consumed with making oil deals, thinking that the oil agreements they are signing without even environmental impact assessments, without proper environmental mitigating, measures in force. They think that it's a miracle that everybody should sing about and clap, when the same oil deals have a bigger impact on destroying our biodiversity, destroying our environmental composition, increasing the effects and rate of climate change on the citizens, with even a little monetary benefit on a common person. So the debate on climate change has both climate-related risks as well as political risks. And I think that as advocates and activists, we should raise the bar for everybody to know that climate-related risks are the biggest political risks, more than even insecurity to us as humanity. So having given that background, I wish to acknowledge the growth and involvement of international business rights with aspects of human rights and environmental rights. But Uganda, and as explained by the MP, Uganda is still dragging very far, relating business and discussing all business deals through mainstreaming both human rights and environmental rights. We still have a long way to go. We are not taking seriously the work of NEMA and the effect or the fact that every investment project needs to have the environmental impact assessment reports with the mitigation measures to ensure that our environments are protected. And another issue I missed raising with the Honorable Minister is our reluctance to plant trees and recover the green cover that we have lost as a nation. When you compare with Tanzania, Tanzanian cities are all green. The roads, when you are in Dar es Salaam, for example, you could think you are in the middle of a forest. By looking at the sky, the sky cover, the horizon has that rich vegetation coverage that you cannot find in Kampala. Yet Uganda is originally known as the Pearl of Africa. So the content of us being the Pearl or claiming to be a hub of a beautiful climate for the African continent, we are losing it at a very faster rate because of negligence by the political leadership and lack of appreciation of effects of climate change. Away from that, Mr. Moderator, allow me briefly talk about the scanty provisions in our constitution that are related to environment and climate change. Our national objectives and directives of state policy in Objective 13 do realize the need to protect all natural resources, including flora and fauna. But when you go to the composition of the constitution, beyond the mention in the national directives of state policy, we just have a minor Article 245 discussing in a small paragraph about protection of environment. And that shows you the casual approach of our political leadership to matters of environment and climate change adaptation and mitigation. I know that the National Development Plan has requirements relating to climate change, but these are rarely implemented. It is largely the talk of technocrats that are developing these plans in relation to international standards. So we have not focused our minds to have serious interventions at policy and the legal framework levels. But away from that, civil society can play a catalytic role in building up community awareness for climate change and its likely impact in the lives of communities, livelihood, and habitats. Civil society can help build capacities for adaptive actions and reduce vulnerability, mitigate risks, and build resilience among communities. We can help advocate for entrenched policy-making decisions and actions through our watchdog role. And we can also help. We can also help hold our, Mr. Moderator, maybe you need to ask the team to put their mics in mute. Hello, can we please have our mics in mute so that we don't get background information? Thank you. Yeah, the civil society can also hold our governments accountable on efforts to integrate climate change risks into planning and policy measures at all levels. And we can help incorporate long-term climate risks in decision-making together with citizens' engagement by improving access to climate information, as well as giving a voice to the most vulnerable groups. The most vulnerable groups in as far as the effects of climate change are concerned. We can also improve on the legitimacy and accountability efforts to attain greater citizens' engagement, as well as disaster risk and management as part of the climate change adaptation measures. Our other is also ensuring that our governments, because as mentioned earlier, our government is quick at signing protocols and international agreements, and then they do it mostly for propaganda value and come home and sit and forget about these commitments that they commit our country and citizens to. So we can help also build strategies for ensuring a bigger climate change campaign in this country and make it politically risky for the political leadership to ignore the effects of climate change. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Sarah Berete, for wonderful presentations, providing key insights with regards to the role of the private sector and the civil society. I think for the private sector and the civil society organizations that are MEDISAS, I've seen Akina Mama wa Africa is with us. So, and several other NGOs have seen them with us. So there is more to this contribution, to this discussion that we can always make. Now, Madam Sarah Berete, there are more questions that are coming up here that the panelists, that the audience, some are raising. I'll be able to read some of them in your response. But before we go into questions that are directly linked to you, allow me have a presentation from Kai Ebren. Then later on, we can join all the questions that come in, and then we conclude this discussion. Thank you very much for your presentation. May I request Kai Ebren to make his presentation.
How is it, Bernard? Is it that you would like me to start to do my introduction?
Yeah, yes, kindly carry on,
Yeah.
sir. Kindly carry on, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, it has been an interesting introduction from the other speakers today, and of course I recognize all the the questions that are raised, and you see that it's not much of a difference between wherever you come on the planet. This type of climate issues are related to different conditions, of course, depending on where you live, and you have different opportunity to solve the crisis. But we all in the this type of crisis.
Sorry, the network is a little unstable. Sometimes the network can be, these are IT issues, but our technical team is working towards restore the. Mr. Kai.
This, and I hope we come back to that. But I'm going to use some pictures, and if you, Bernard, can give me permission to share the screen, if that's possible.
You have the rights. You have the rights to share.
Well, I got a message here. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Kindly share. Kindly share.
Yeah. So then we will see. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. So that's let's go through my slides I have been using. So so we know that the climate change law doesn't solve the climate crisis, but the law indicate when we look from a government's perspective, so government's role to play here, we need the governance ambition is always connected to the international discussion and related to the Paris Agreement. I'm going to go through some common sense on the discussion on the global level and what I have seen when I look into the different types of climate laws that existing today, and also the leaders of the countries that are most advanced in implementation of climate laws. Climate law have to add other policies and action to serve the climate laws intention and targets. It's a need of a governance structure with incentives, smart regulation, and collaboration, and also involvement of stakeholders. And often when you look around the
Mr. Kai Ebron.
in France, in Canada, that's involved the citizens in the climate law discussions, also in the policies and actions. So, but I decided to look at 3 different countries or sort of geographic areas which all have been implemented the climate law. First, the interesting development has been in the United Kingdom. And the UK Climate Act initiative was based on the concerned public opinion already 2008. And you can listen to one of the people who has been involved in all this campaigning around the climate law, Jonathan Porritt, in my podcast program, which I had to talk with him through how the climate issue has been on the top agenda for the United Kingdom. When the law was in place, the Climate Act law, they also introduced what you can call a carbon budget model to set the limit on the amount of greenhouse gases that can be released from all sectors in the UK economy over a 5 years period. Policies and action were implemented to keep UK on track to meet the long-term goal. And then also the government provides with annual reports to the parliament and how it progresses to meet the carbon budget. Then, as I understand that it was also discussed in Uganda, an independent committee on climate change with the experts which have to monitor and the government's work, carbon budgets, progress on emissions, reduction in climate adaptation policies. And UK have, under the years, successfully reduced the greenhouse gas emission with about 43% since 1990. But it has been low-hanging fruit. Now the hard work started. And the Committee of Climate Change reported in 2020 that the policy implementation has been not yet by the required ambitions. The UK government are not on track for the current 2050 net zero target. And it's more coming around the discussion about the carbon footprint, because consumers in UK, they buy products, and the WWF, the World Wildlife Fund, they did a report and showing how 6 commodities in UK alone, more than 40% of the UK's overseas land footprint, it's about nearly 6 million hectare is in countries with a high risk of deforestation and weak governance and poor labor standards. So you see, it's a relationship between the consumption in the welfare states, also how they affects the climate issue and the relationship to other countries. And that had to be calculated in the reports of the climate policies and follow-ups. Now it's in UK, it's a discussion also about the new climate emergency bill. But 2 days ago, the UK government proposed a new climate reduction target with 78% to 2035. Well, that was in preparation in front of the Biden meeting today. And but the opinion in UK related to the climate law has been high, and it's what I say, a good sort of mobilization of the citizens to scrutinize the climate work in the UK. If we look at Europe, we got new information this week also, that it was a breakthrough as a EU negotiator reach a deal of the European climate law. And it is the first European climate law which has set the target that Europe's economy and society should become climate neutral 2050. And the last development was also that the implementation of the 2030 target, which will be to reduce net greenhouse gas emission by at least 55% by 2030 compared to the 1990 levels. This means achieving a net zero greenhouse gas emission for the EU countries as a whole, mainly by cutting emission, investing in green technologies, and protecting the natural environment. The law aims to ensure that all EU policies contribute to this goal, and that all sectors of the economy and society play their part. It means that to set the direction, meeting the 2030 reduction target and the 2050 climate neutrality objective through all policies in socially fair and cost-efficient manner, and create a system for monitoring progress and take further action that is needed, and provide predictability for investors and other economic actors, ensure also that the transition to climate neutrality is irreversible. So, and the climate law includes measures to keep track of progress and adjust actions based on existing systems, such as governance progress for member states, national energy plans, and climate plans. It's also that it will come a regular report by the European Environment Agency. But if you would like to listen to more about the climate law in Europe, you can, from this afternoon, listen to the latest podcast from me, which I have a discussion with the chief negotiator, Jytte Guteland, and you can visit my website, kaiembren.org, on that. And then we go to my home country, Sweden, which has been a forerunner in the fight to fight climate change. And when you see and go through all this type of action that are under the law, you recognize the same type of issue, even if we have different perspective and different conditions, whatever we are in the world. So, but the Swedish targets formulated in the climate law is to be the first welfare state to reach zero emissions 2045. And after that to deliver negative emissions. The climate law are strongly related to the overall government's policies and actions. And that's one of the issues that I think is important to raise here, is that also other ministries in the government follow the overall climate law. And it also means that the Swedish law connects the different sectors in the fight of climate change. How taxes is working related to the climate issue, infrastructure investment, transportation, agriculture, energy, migration, labor, education, foreign affairs, relationship to developing countries. So that's all the issues are scrutinized by the climate law, and that we will see what the outcome will be. But it's a hard work to come to the zero emission 2045. But it's also here in the Swedish law, which has influence from the UK law, but it's also that the annual, where every year you have to come up with the figures how and you can follow and scrutinize the law, how it works for the climate action plan. For the climate action plan in Sweden is something that is proposed every 4th year, and that will be also part of what the national government will deliver to the Paris Agreement of the NDCs. In Sweden, they also have an independent climate change committee that have the right to and the role to analyze the work, and it's independent from the government. And also an implementation organization has been set in Sweden. It's independent from the government, even if it was initiated by the government. And so far, the Fossil Free Sweden organization has delivered 20 roadmaps to meet the climate crisis. And when we then finally going into the relationship to see also between the developed and the developing countries, I must say that I'm listening to the UN Secretary General when he recently asked about all the G7 members of and other developed countries, as well as multilateral and national development banks, to increase the share of climate finance allocated to adaptation and resilience to at least 50% of their total climate finance. And when we look at the reality, today's adaptations and resilience finance accounts for only about 20% of total climate finance flows. And we should remember when we discuss this, that the world promises the $100 billion commitment, which was made over the decade ago. It must be delivered. And when we see Glasgow in front of COP26, we need to find how we can act really urgently on the international level. But in the Africa continent, with such a young population, it's a good source that can't wait. Time is now to drive the needed changes to meet high climate targets. A climate law with high ambition in policies and actions will stimulate new technology, create jobs, secure adaptation programs, and create new green finance models. And looking back to my 3 cases of existing climate laws in the UK, Europe, and Sweden, it could be stronger formulation on issues that are related to the developing countries. But it's a lack of it. Even if the UK has committed to jointly mobilize $100 billion per year in the climate finance development to the developing countries, and from public, both from public and private sources. It is an old commitment, but it has been renewed now. And but I think also we have to look at the impact of climate investment in Africa, how we can develop new already existing method, but also develop action plans under the new climate laws targets, and develop also new to steer and to create more of new thinking of financial capital, how to and private investment, philanthropic capital, green bonds, emission trade solution, crowdsourcing, and crowdfunding. We will need all the tools on the financing sector to succeed, whatever you are on our planet. So that was my contribution today, and I'm open to answer questions from the participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Kai Abram, for that insightful presentation, giving us the perspective from the developed countries. Now, the questions have come in. I don't know. Madam Sarah Birete. Yes, thank you. Thank you again for coming back. There are some questions that kept coming in here. The first questions that is coming in, the first questions that is here is that, which relates to the very first question that was asked that we asked Honorable. Kenya, for example, invests almost 41% of its investment comes from the private sector to the climate change efforts. Do you think the private sector in Uganda are doing less?
Yeah, if I may first attend to that question. I mean, what would you want the private sector to do? We are in the process of formulating the laws. I know that we have environmental protection measures under the National Environmental Management Authority, NEMA, under Wildlife Authority, and other related departments under the Ministry of the Environment. But the people who are custodians of our environment are the ones doing a big role in destroying the same environment that they are entrusted to protect. Under our constitution, government holds in trust national assets, including natural resources, on the behalf of the people, and they should exercise their mandate in the best interests of the people. But look, we have about 5 court cases where citizens and CSOs are suing NEMA for giving away forests to be degraded, cut down by NEMA. Forests are given away by the president. You know the demonstrations about Mabera giveaway,
In
where we
2009,
even
yes.
for sugarcane planting. A president gives away the biggest tropical forest in Africa, the biggest biodiversity of Uganda's climate for sugarcane planting. This is the mentality of our political leadership when it comes to the environment. I think the Mabira case demonstrates
2009.
the carelessness of our political leadership in as far as protecting and preserving our biodiversity is concerned. So given that the investors, and he was giving it away to investors, and this is private sector. So you have a situation where there is no demonstration of political leadership in the field of mitigating effects of climate change, in the field of preserving the environment. And they connive with our private sector. Some members of, and I'm glad Dr. Magic goes is on the call. I hope she's still around.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, they connive with some members of the private sector to destroy and degrade our environment. So what can they do? But I know not all of them are in that category of the political club that does not care about the future and nature. I know the environment, the business community can do a lot more, including the move away from Kavera. I think we should recognize that as an effort to preserve and protect the environment and mitigate effects of climate change. We have all moved to paper bags and the big weeds of the Kavera that is recommended, but we have many more damaging actions. The rate at which the wetlands are disappearing. The president, in his rhetoric approach, threatens to arrest whoever is destroying the environment. I happen to stay in Namgongo. In the last 4 years that I've stayed in Namgongo, we have lost all the wetlands that were along that road, and they are taken over by government people. So, you know, actions to do with the mitigating effects of climate change and preserving the environment need action and not political rhetoric.
Can I comment?
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Kai Abram, you can make a comment, sir.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in the local situation in Uganda, but I can see sort of conflicts in this field. It's important to see how could the climate law support engagement and collaboration between different types of stakeholders. And I think even if the situation in Sweden is not the same as in Uganda, but this is a lot of disagreement between industry leaders sometimes and also the politician. But in Sweden, we have an advantage of that the industry is more progressive than the government. So, but what they created was what they call the fossil-free action group that was initiated under the climate law, but as a part of an independent organization where you brought all the collaborated, all the stakeholders who are involved in the discussion in agri-forestry, biodiversity, and tried to find a common sense that which has an impact on climate. And they delivered 20 roadmaps now and very concrete plans how you minimize the impact on different activities in society. And I think that it was the climate law who gave the framework for it. But as I said from the beginning when I talked, it was the climate law in itself is not something that solved the climate crisis. It's the action under the climate law, and it's open up, give the right to try to drive in the direction to reduce the impact of climate change.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Earlier, the contributions that if I get Madam Sarah Bereti rightly, is that the government is playing a double-edged kind of sword of negotiation, where it's playing a give and take. In the actual sense, they provide the law and then again go behind and give spaces for investment. So thank you for the conversations that are coming in. One question that is coming in from, I think, okay, one question that's coming in, that I appreciate the presentations of Kai. I think this is to Mr. Kai. Yet I have these questions. That's why do developed countries always put stringent conditions on LDCs, that is low developed countries, to access the market? For example, Uganda is in the process of starting to produce Kera EV, and Kera EV is a motor vehicle that is being produced here in Uganda. So the question that surrounds this question, this comment that is coming in, is that why is it that developed countries always put stringent conditions on products that are coming from Africa or from low developed countries?
Oh, that's a good question, and of course I have not the answer on it, and I think this is also a question that the technology transfer between countries, then you go in the direction of low carbon economy, and trade have to be sort of under scrutiny related to the climate law. And I think the question is right to discuss, and I think we should try to minimize the rules on technology, which I think it's important to see the country's situation, where do you need the investment to create a low carbon economy. And I think if you can't find the right balance between technology and climate, and we have to find it's a given and taken in this type of discussion under the trade agreement. But I understand that it is a conflicting issue, but we have to see how we solve that. And I don't have exactly the right, maybe the right answer on this issue, because I'm not working on it daily, but I see, I recognize it as a problem.
Thank you for that response. One comment coming in here. Thank you very much, Madam Sarah, for your unwavering voice for the civil society. Great presentation. Great presentation. That's just an appreciation that is coming in. Now, Mr. Kai Ebron, what do you make of the view of a developed country like the United States of America that moves in and moves out of the climate change agreement? For example, the Donald Trump administration moved out of the Paris Accord agreement, and when the Biden administration came in, they jump right in. They jump right into the agreement. What do you make of such perspective, or that behavior that relates to policy?
To reach the target on climate change, and all the political parties sign up, and then they can fight about the tools. But if you have a consensus that could cover the election period for many years, then the work can be so much stronger. And I think the political consensus around this type of issues is important, and it's a question for our planet. So I think every political interested person have to see that, even if I was very much skeptical to the situation under the President Trump's regime. And but I think political consensus between the mainstream of politics gain over time opportunity to go faster.
All right. Thank you again. The network seems to be unstable here and there, but we thank God that we keep pushing on. A comment coming in from one of the attendees is that, Madam Sarah Birete, thank you very much for shining light on this, on what the government is not doing. But Kampala is always very dirty. We request that the civil society also show more light on the state of Kampala. How do you comment from that?
Yeah, thank you very much. Kampala is an undesirable state in so many ways. And the situation gets worse when we are returning home from some of these organized countries. You really, especially when you're looking at the aerial view, you see how disorganized our cities are right from Entebbe. So it's the journey from the airport, only good during the times when we are preparing for the Commonwealth Summit, Ishchogam. You know, there was light right from the airport and the State House was glittering, and we thought we would maintain that infrastructure that was heavily invested in during the Commonwealth Summit, commonly known as Chogam, for some of us who were old enough to experience a beautiful city in our livelihood. And I don't think we shall get it back. And it's very unfortunate. There were artificial trees planted all over Kampala. Kampala was shining.
Yeah.
So I thought that those were permanent structures that would remain. I thought that it was an infrastructure. There was a whole 40 billion project for beautifying Kampala. So I thought that Kampala would remain beautiful with flowers, with the trees. But 1 month after the summit, everything started disappearing. I think just after the second week of the summit.
Exactly.
So that's how crooked we are as citizens. We don't even respect ourselves because everybody would feel good in a beautiful city. Look at the green in the city, the State Square that is now under military occupation with the military tanks. State Square during the Constituent Making Assembly was changed and renamed Constitutional Square. It is supposed to be the free space for citizens as enjoyment of their citizenry. It has been under military occupation for more than 10 years. Centenary Park, the other green, has completely disappeared. It's a shopping mall, it's a bar area, and it is still a wetland. And yesterday when I passed there in the morning, it had water flowing through Oasis Mall. The crisis that the environmentalists went in to block Golf Course Hotel, which sits on a green, you know, the green belt of Kampala. The wetland is part of the wetland and is supposed to maintain the green belt. But golf course and that green belt has been eaten away by politically connected people. We all know who owns Golf Course Hotel, the untouchables of this country. So in brief, when you have a declining and regressing democratic architecture, you cannot preserve the environment and environmental rights, and you cannot preserve human rights. And that's where we are.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kai, do you want to have a rebut?
Yeah, well, I think it's important, as Sarah said, that the city can look much more beautiful than it is today. And I think I am very much of a promoter of the local government, also a clean city, and also that cities' involvement in the work on climate change is very important. But it's also that the government, the national government, give the local government opportunity to take decision by themselves. And that I think it's sort of you need to work on a structure change from when we talk about local citizens and opportunity to take part, and from a bottom-up perspective. And I've seen so many good examples on that all around the world with different types of leadership, but it's important to see the role of cities to be a part of the solution.
Thank you very much for that, Robert. Many participants are agreeing with argument which has been brought by Madam Sarah, and appreciating that conversation that you raised with regards to Kampala and so many other issues. Ladies and gentlemen, we have taken 1 hour and 46 minutes into this discussion. We're in the verge of closing this session. And as we conclude this conversation, let us have final words, comments coming in from our panelists, Madam Sarah Berete and Mr. Kai Abraham, that are still with us. As you make your final remarks, kindly, there's a question that has come in here and saying, the young people, where can the young people start from, those who wants to participate in climate change, and there is no space? Where can the young people start participating in climate change conversation? And there is, and arguing that there is actually no space for the young people. So as we conclude this conversation, as you give your final remarks, kindly address those comments. Maybe perhaps we can start with Kai Abraham, Mr. Kai Abraham, and then we conclude.
Okay, even if you don't see me anymore because of the technicality, but what I'm saying that everyone knows maybe Greta Thunberg from Sweden, the young schoolgirl who started the campaign on climate change. And I think it's very important to give the opportunity for the young people to organize themselves and to recruit them then into politics. Because if we don't have a link between the engagement with young people into politics, we're not going to solve this, because we need recruit new young people into politics, and that's a very important part. And of course, it's important to support all young initiative. I think you also have Greta Thunberg groups in Uganda that could be a way to build engagement and to support the young generation. I feel very sorry, as in my age, that they need to take this action because we should have solved it before. But it's also important to see a link between the young generation's engagement into politics.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kai Abraham, for that advice to the young people. Now let's have closing remarks and perhaps the advice to the young people by Madam Sarah Berete. Thank you. You're welcome, Madam.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to join my co-panelists, in enjoining the young people to join the fellow youth that are leading the global climate change campaign. They already have a platform, so they are not excluded. And the young people have powerful digital tools that they can use. I want to give a small example that young Ugandans can use to rally behind the campaign for mitigating effects of climate change. Let them plant a tree a month, and take pictures. As they plant a tree, take pictures, take selfies, share them on social media. After 1 month, plant another tree. As you share, you say this, take selfies with your 2 trees. In a year, you will have 12 trees. And most of us, even if there are young people who are urban set and may say they don't have space for planting trees, most of us still have our upcountry connections. Yeah. So as you visit your grandparents, as you visit your relatives, plant a tree, because there is so much space in the countryside. But also in the urban centers, we can plant a tree, the adaptable trees that can grow near a house, even if you plant it in a potted flower. So it is not a question of land. I don't think there is any person who has ever wanted to plant trees in Africa and has failed to find land where to plant them. So the young people can use social media as a powerful tool for developing the needed 10,000 kilometers of the green belt in Africa to recover the lost green cover and mitigate impact of climate change in a bigger say. Africa, the young people, you're still the majority. In Uganda, you're over majority, you're 78. The future of the environment belongs to you more than it belongs to us. You have more time to deal with the worst effects of climate change. But as I conclude, I want to borrow the wise words of James Woodburn, who stated that a true conservationist is a man who knows that the world is not given by his fathers, but borrowed from his children. My children are teenagers. I must make sure they conserve the environment. The young people should conserve the environment because the world they are living in today is borrowed from their children. It is not inherited from their fathers. So they need to have a better world to pass on to their children, and the children to pass it on to their children, and we make sure we maintain a chain of a healthy planet. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Sarah Birete. Thank you very much, Kai Ebran, for joining us in this conversation. We have been blessed by several distinguished guests and with distinguished audience. We have kept an average audience of about 50 as of now, and we have taken 1 hour and 52 minutes in this conversation. And that is the time that we had promised that this conversation will take. Thank you very much. Join us again. This has been Efficacy Methodology that has brought this conversation, and will continue to bring this conversation to many Ugandans out there. Thank you and have a good evening.